You want to know the fastest way to get an avoidant's attention, the one thing that pierces through all their defenses and stops them in their tracks. It's directness. And let me tell you why this is so powerful. It dismantles the very mechanism that avoidants rely on to stay safe. See, avoidants live in a world of confusion by design. They thrive in ambiguity because it protects them. If they keep things vague, if they never quite define what you are, what they want, or what they feel, then they don't have to face the risk of intimacy. Ambiguity is their shield. But what happens when you refuse to play that game? What happens when you step into communication with absolute clarity? Suddenly, their shield doesn't work anymore. Let's break this down. Most people, when they deal with someone avoidant, fall into the trap of trying to decode them. They overanalyze every text, every pause, every shift in tone. They try to fill the silence with more words, more explanations, more chasing. But here's the truth: the more you try to make sense of their confusion, the deeper into the trap you go. Because confusion is their comfort zone, it keeps them in control. Directness, on the other hand, is like turning on a light in a dark room. It reveals everything. When you say exactly what you mean without fear, you force them to face reality. You take away the gray area they hide in, and that, my friends, is intoxicating for them. They may resist it at first, they may even pull back. But make no mistake, they feel the impact. Think about it. Imagine two people speaking to an avoidant. One says, "I just feel like maybe you don't care anymore, or maybe you do. I don't know, I'm just confused. Can you tell me what you're thinking?" That's what most people do. And the avoidant, they relax because now they're in the driver's seat. They don't have to answer. They can let the ambiguity live and they feel safe. Now imagine the second person. They look them in the eye and they say, "Here's what I want. Here's what I expect. And here's what I will not tolerate." No threats, no begging, just clear, calm, unapologetic truth. Suddenly the avoidant feels something they're not used to: clarity. And clarity demands a response. Clarity forces them to stop hiding. And whether they like it or not, that directness gets under their skin. Why? Because deep down, avoidants aren't running from people who are needy. They're running from people who confirm their worst fears, that love means chaos, pressure, and loss of freedom. When you communicate directly, you don't add to the chaos. You bring order, you bring stability. You tell them with your words and your tone, "This is where I stand. Take it or leave it." And let me tell you, that is magnetic. But let me warn you, directness doesn't mean aggression. It's not about barking demands. It's not about controlling the other person. Aggression pushes them away. Directness isn't about force. It's about certainty. It's about being rooted in who you are, what you value, and what you're willing to accept. It's about speaking without the fear of losing them. And that's what makes it so irresistible. Because here's the paradox. Avoidants secretly crave what they resist the most. They want someone strong enough to hold their ground without collapsing into neediness. They want someone who refuses to drown in the same pool of confusion they live in. Your directness communicates. I don't need you to define me. I'm already defined. And that is when obsession begins. Not because you manipulated them, not because you played games, but because you became the one person who broke the spell of confusion. So the question is, are you willing to be that person? Are you willing to step out of the endless cycle of guessing and decoding and instead become a voice of clarity in their storm? Because when you do, you will discover something profound. Avoidants may run from chaos, but they are drawn to certainty. And certainty is what makes them think about you long after the conversation ends. And if you take nothing else from this moment, take this: clarity is power, directness is freedom. And the moment you communicate without fear, you stop chasing their approval and start commanding their attention. Because in the end, the person who wins the game with an avoidant is not the one who talks the most, not the one who bends the most, not the one who begs the most. It's the one who dares to be clear. So remember this the next time you're tempted to soften your truth, to water down your words, to dance around what you really want. Speak directly. Say it plainly, and let the chips fall where they may. Because directness doesn't just break their confusion, it breaks their pattern. And once you've broken their pattern, you've already won. If there's one thing you have to understand about avoidance, it's this: they are addicted to chaos. Not because they want drama, but because their nervous system has been wired to expect it. Somewhere in their past, whether through childhood experiences, broken relationships, or betrayals, they learned that intimacy equals instability. So when you come into their life and you communicate in a way that is frantic, emotional, or overly reactive, you confirm exactly what they already believe: that closeness is dangerous. And when that belief is reinforced, they withdraw. They retreat into silence, into distance, into emotional exile. But when you approach them with calmness, with composure, with a sense of grounded certainty, you disrupt that entire belief system. Your energy tells a different story. You send a signal that says, being close doesn't have to feel like losing control. Being with me doesn't mean chaos. It means peace. And that, right there, is when their obsession begins to form. Think about how rare calmness is in communication today. Most people are constantly reacting, typing novels over text, demanding explanations, raising their voices when they feel ignored, or swinging between hot and cold to force a response. That noise feeds right into the avoidant sphere. It makes them feel trapped, suffocated, overwhelmed. But when you show up differently, when your words are measured, your tone is steady, and your presence is consistent, you stand out like a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. And let me tell you, people who live in fear are drawn to lighthouses. Here's the psychology behind it. Human beings are wired to seek what regulates them. If someone makes us feel more anxious, we eventually pull away. If someone makes us feel calm, we want more of that presence. Avoidants are no exception. In fact, they are even more sensitive to it. Their bodies react to calm communication like a thirsty person finding water. They may not admit it, they may even resist it at first, but deep down they crave it because it gives them a sense of safety they rarely feel. Now, let's make this practical. Imagine they pull back. Most people panic. They start asking, "Why are you ignoring me? Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me?" That is chaos. It's emotional pressure, and it makes the avoidant retreat even further. Now imagine you respond with calmness. Instead of matching their withdrawal with fear, you respond with something like, "I sense you need space right now. That's okay. I'm here when you're ready to talk." Do you see the difference? That calmness doesn't chase, doesn't pressure, doesn't add fuel to the fire. It disarms them. It says, "I'm not here to engulf you. I'm here to anchor myself. And if you want to meet me here, the door is open." That's powerful. What makes calm communication so magnetic is that it's unexpected. Avoidants anticipate drama. They're ready for the storm. But when the storm never comes, when you bring stillness instead of chaos, it forces them to rethink their entire script about you. They start asking themselves, why is this person different? Why aren't they reacting like everyone else? Why do I feel safer with them than I do with anyone else? And once that question is planted, it doesn't go away. It grows. It turns into curiosity, into intrigue, and eventually into obsession. Now, I want to be clear, calmness is not indifference. It's not coldness. Indifference pushes people away because it communicates that you don't care. Calmness is the opposite. It communicates that you care, but you're not controlled by the outcome. You're invested, but not desperate. You're present, but not pressuring. And that balance is incredibly attractive to someone who fears losing themselves in relationships. Philosophically, calm communication is about power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind of power that dominates yourself. It's the strength to regulate your own emotions, to refuse to be hijacked by fear, to stand steady even when someone else wavers. And when you carry that kind of presence, people feel it. Avoidants feel it. And they become obsessed not with what you say, but with the state you create. So here's the challenge the next time you want to raise your voice, the next time you want to send 10 back-to-back messages, the next time you feel that urge to react from fear, pause, take a breath, step back, and ask yourself, what story am I telling with my energy right now? Am I reinforcing their fear? Or am I becoming the calm they can't find anywhere else? Because at the end of the day, obsession isn't created by force. It's not created by chasing. It's created when you give someone an experience they can't forget. And for the avoidant, the most unforgettable experience of all is peace. So let this truth sink in. Chaos repels, calm attracts. And if you master the art of calm communication, you don't just get their attention. You get their respect, their trust, and their obsession. One of the greatest mistakes people make when communicating with an avoidant is over-explaining. They pour out every detail, every thought, every insecurity, believing that if they just give enough information, the avoidant will finally understand, finally open up, finally give them the reassurance they crave. But what happens? The opposite. The more you flood them with words, the faster they retreat. It's not because they don't hear you, it's because over-communication feels like pressure. It overwhelms their nervous system and confirms their belief that intimacy equals loss of freedom. This is why brevity is so powerful. Brevity creates mystery. Brevity creates space. Brevity gives them room to imagine, to think, to wonder about you. And that wondering is where obsession begins. Think about it this way. The human mind is hardwired to fill in gaps. When there's silence, we fill it with meaning. When there's an unfinished story, we obsess over the ending. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember incomplete or interrupted things more than the things that are finished. If you give an avoidant endless explanations, endless reassurances, you're closing the loop for them. You're giving them certainty, and ironically, certainty kills intrigue. But when you speak less, when your words are sharp, purposeful, and leave space for interpretation, you activate their imagination. You force them to participate in the story, and suddenly they can't stop thinking about you. Now, brevity doesn't mean coldness. It's not about giving one-word answers or stonewalling. That creates distance, not attraction. Brevity is about precision. It's about saying exactly what needs to be said, and nothing more. When you text, you don't need 10 sentences to express yourself. Sometimes 3 words land with more impact than 30. When you speak, you don't need to justify your boundaries with a 3-hour lecture. A calm, simple statement is far more powerful. Why? Because it communicates certainty. And certainty is magnetic. Imagine someone says to an avoidant, I just don't know if you really care about me, because sometimes you're distant, and I feel like maybe it's me, maybe I'm too much, but I just want to know where we stand, and if you could just give me some reassurance, I'd feel better. That's over-communication. It's heavy. It demands. And the avoidant feels the walls closing in. Now picture the opposite. Someone looks at them and simply says, I value honesty. If you want to be here, be here. If not, that's okay. That's brief. That's clear. That leaves space. And let me tell you, that space makes the avoidant think. It makes them question, why aren't they chasing me? Why aren't they flooding me with words? Why do I feel more curious about them than anyone else? That curiosity is where attachment begins to flip. Philosophically, brevity is about restraint. It's about holding back just enough to keep the dynamic alive. The greatest communicators throughout history have known this. They didn't win people over by saying everything that could be said. They won people over by saying just enough to make others lean in. When you communicate with an avoidant, you have to understand that leaning in is the key. They won't lean into you if you're already smothering them with words. They lean in when they're intrigued, when they're left with something unresolved, when their mind starts chasing the meaning you didn't spell out. And this is where the balance comes in. Too much brevity, and you come across as cold, detached, uninterested. Too much explanation, and you come across as desperate, overwhelming, needy. The power is in the middle. The power is in communicating with precision and then stopping. Letting the silence do the rest. Letting the mystery breathe. Because silence, when used intentionally, is not emptiness. It's power. Think about the last time someone didn't respond to you right away. What happened? You thought about it. You replayed the interaction in your mind. You gave it energy. You obsessed. That's exactly what happens in the mind of an avoidant when you communicate with brevity. Your few words echo louder than an essay ever could. So here's the challenge. The next time you're tempted to send a long explanation, stop yourself. Ask, what's the core truth I need to express here? Say that and nothing more. Watch what happens when you leave space instead of filling it. Watch how their mind races to fill the gaps. Watch how curiosity begins to replace their fear. Because obsession doesn't grow in spaces that are crowded with noise. Obsession grows in spaces where the mind is free to imagine, to wonder, to chase the unknown. So remember this, brevity builds mystery, and mystery builds desire. And if you can master the art of saying less, you'll discover something profound. The less you explain yourself, the more they'll want to understand you. Let me tell you something most people get wrong about avoidance. They think if they just give more, bend more, compromise more, eventually the avoidant will feel safe enough to stay. They believe love means proving themselves worthy by sacrificing their own needs. But the reality is this, when you abandon your own boundaries, you don't pull the avoidant closer, you push them further away. Because without boundaries, you're not showing love, you're showing fear. And fear never earns respect. Avoidants test boundaries. Not always consciously, but they do. They want to see if you'll crumble under the weight of their distance, their silence, their inconsistencies. And most people fail the test. They chase. They plead. They try to negotiate for love, not realizing that every time they cross their own boundary, they lower their value in the eyes of the avoidant. The irony is brutal. The more you sacrifice yourself to keep them, the less they want to stay. Now let's flip this. Imagine you're someone who communicates with respect for yourself first. You say what you will and won't accept, not as an ultimatum, not as a threat, but as a declaration of self-worth. You don't scream, you don't beg, you don't chase. You simply state, here's where my line is. I won't step past it, and neither will you. That's not control, that's clarity. And clarity creates attraction. Why? Because boundaries tell the avoidant something they don't hear often. I don't need you to complete me. I choose you, but I don't depend on you. That one message, spoken not with words but through action, flips the script. You are no longer the person trying to break down their walls. You are the person who built your own walls, strong, respectful, unshakable. And paradoxically, that strength becomes the very thing that draws them in. This isn't just psychology, it's philosophy. Boundaries are the architecture of respect. Without boundaries, there is no respect. Without respect, there is no desire. Think about it. When someone sets a firm boundary with you, at first you may resist, you may test it, but deep down you respect them more for having the courage to hold it. The same is true with avoidance. They may not like your boundaries, but they can't help but respect you for them. And respect, in the long run, is the only soil love can grow in. Now let's get practical. Suppose the avoidant disappears for days without explanation, then comes back as if nothing happened. Most people swallow their hurt and accept it, afraid to scare them off. That's the absence of boundaries. But imagine instead you calmly say, I value consistency. If disappearing is how you operate, this won't work for me. That's a boundary. No drama, no begging, just truth. And whether they admit it or not, that boundary plants a seed. They think about it. They feel the weight of it. And they know they can't treat you casually without consequence. Here's the paradox: boundaries don't push people away. They filter people out. They filter out the ones who can't meet you where you are, and they magnetize the ones who can. If the avoidant can't handle your boundaries, then you've saved yourself years of frustration. And if they can, if they feel the pull of respect instead of the push of fear, then you've just laid the foundation for real intimacy. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are doors that decide what kind of love you let in. And avoidants, more than anyone, need to see those doors. Because without them, they will test, they will push, they will retreat. But when they encounter someone who refuses to bend beyond their breaking point, something shifts inside them. For perhaps the first time, they meet a person who cannot be controlled by fear. And that is magnetic. That is obsession. So the question becomes, do you want to be the person who fears losing them, or the person they fear losing? Because that's what boundaries decide. The one with no boundaries becomes replaceable. The one with clear, respectful boundaries becomes unforgettable. Never forget this. Your boundaries are not barriers to love, they are invitations to respect. And if you want to command the respect of an avoidant, if you want to flip the dynamic from chaos to obsession, then stop abandoning yourself for the illusion of closeness. Stand firm. Speak clearly. Respect yourself enough to demand respect in return. Because in the end, love without boundaries is chaos. But love with boundaries is power. And the moment you choose power over fear, you don't just change how they see you. You change how you see yourself. Avoidants are masters at avoiding emotional depth. That's why they're called avoidants. They dodge the hard conversations. They redirect when things get too intimate. And they build walls so high you feel like you'll never climb over them. Most people, when faced with those walls, either bang on the door with demands. Why don't you care about me? Why can't you just say how you feel? Or they walk away in silence, defeated. But there's a third way, and this is the one that truly gets under their skin. It's the art of asking questions that make them think. See, avoidants are not immune to connection. They're not heartless. They're not incapable of love. What they are is defensive. They've built mental armor around themselves. And here's the thing about armor. You can't smash through it by force. But you can slip through the cracks if you know where to aim. That's what powerful questions do. They bypass defenses and slip into the mind, where they linger long after the conversation is over. Think about the difference between interrogation and inspiration. When you say, "Why are you ignoring me?" you're interrogating. That makes them defensive. They pull away further. But when you ask something like, "What feels safe for you in a relationship?" or "When do you feel most understood?" you're not pushing them into a corner. You're opening a door. And avoidants are far more willing to walk through an open door than to be dragged through one. The secret is this. Avoidants spend so much energy avoiding feelings that when someone speaks to them in a way that engages their mind rather than their fear, they pay attention. You're not threatening their independence. You're not demanding instant vulnerability. You're planting seeds. And those seeds grow in their private moments, when they're alone, when their defenses are down. That's when they start thinking about you differently. Now, you don't have to be a psychologist to do this. You don't need complex strategies. You just need curiosity, real curiosity, not manipulation, not trick questions. Questions that reveal you're not chasing them, you're inviting them. Questions that make them reflect on themselves in a way they normally avoid. For example, instead of saying, "Why can't you commit?" you ask, "What does commitment look like for you?" That's a shift. Instead of asking, "Do you even care about me?" you ask, "What does caring for someone look like in your world?" That's a shift. See the difference. One pushes, the other invites. And here's the deeper truth. When you ask questions that make them think, you're doing more than starting a conversation. You're giving them a mirror. Avoidants rarely pause to examine their own patterns because avoiding is their pattern. But when your words point them inward, They're confronted with themselves in a way they can't run from. And that confrontation, if delivered with respect and curiosity, doesn't scare them. It fascinates them. They begin associating you with insight, with growth, with possibility. And let me tell you, that association is powerful. It makes them want to come back, not because you demanded it, but because being around you makes them feel like they're becoming more aware, more alive, more human. Philosophically, this is about depth. Most relationships live on the surface. Small talk, trivial fights, repetitive patterns, but depth is rare. And what is rare is valuable. When you bring depth into a relationship with an avoidant, not through force, but through the right questions, you become unforgettable. They may resist, they may retreat temporarily, but the questions you leave with them keep echoing, and echoes don't go away. Let's be clear. This isn't about fixing them. It's not your job to heal their wounds. It's not your job to drag them into awareness, but it is your power to communicate in a way that sparks thought instead of fear. And that power shifts the dynamic, because most people trigger their avoidance by demanding answers. But you plant questions that open doors, and those doors don't just change how they see the relationship, they change how they see you. So here's the challenge for you. The next time you feel the urge to demand clarity, to force them to speak, stop. Instead, breathe and ask a question that makes them pause, not defend. Ask the kind of question that doesn't just demand an answer, it invites reflection. That's how you bypass their fear and awaken their mind. Because obsession doesn't grow in the soil of pressure. It grows in the soil of curiosity. And when you learn to ask the right questions, you stop being the person they run from and become the person they can't stop thinking about. So remember this, don't demand answers. Plant questions. Because the right question, spoken at the right time, can echo louder in their mind than 1,000 pleas ever could. You've been speaking with an avoidant personality type, someone who has built walls around themselves so high they've convinced even themselves that they're impenetrable. You're consistent, you're calm, you're not overreaching, not demanding, not suffocating. And then suddenly, without warning, you pull your energy back. You're no longer available at every turn. You're no longer filling the silence with validation or reassurance. The moment this happens, their mind doesn't go quiet. It does the opposite. It gets loud. It races. It replays every word you've spoken, every subtle cue, every nuance of your presence. That silence you create, it becomes deafening to them. And this is the paradox of the avoidant. The more you stop feeding them with direct communication, the more obsessed they become with the meaning behind your absence. Now, here's the psychology of it. Avoidants often live in a state of hypervigilance toward closeness. They believe closeness equals danger because somewhere along their journey they linked intimacy to pain, control, or loss of autonomy. But once they've tasted a style of communication that is calm, respectful, and emotionally intelligent, they experience something they've rarely encountered before: safety. And safety, for someone who has always armored themselves against intimacy, is addictive. It challenges the entire operating system they've built. So when you remove that energy, even temporarily, you're not just disappearing, you're interrupting the very system they rely on to feel in control. Their mind becomes consumed with, why isn't she responding? Did I do something wrong? Why do I care so much when I swore I wouldn't? That spiral is not random. It's a direct response to the vacuum you create. Think about it. Human beings are not wired to crave chaos. We are wired to crave meaning. For an avoidant, the constant push and pull of relationships often becomes their normal. But when you bring a different kind of communication, when you speak with clarity, calmness, and self-respect, you offer something rare: certainty. And certainty is powerful. The moment it's withdrawn, they don't just miss you, they miss the certainty that you brought to their nervous system. And here's the twist. The absence of certainty doesn't push them away, it pulls them in deeper. Because uncertainty awakens obsession. This is why avoidants get stuck replaying messages in their head, rereading old texts, or even fantasizing about conversations you might have had. It's not just nostalgia. It's their mind trying to recreate the feeling of safety you once gave them. They may never admit it out loud, but that hunger is real, and it grows every day your silence continues. Because silence, when paired with dignity, is not rejection. It's presence amplified. Now, let's step back for a second. What makes this so powerful isn't just psychology, it's philosophy. It's about human nature at its core. When you show up authentically, when your words are congruent with your energy, and then you withdraw with strength instead of bitterness, you are embodying one of the deepest truths of influence. People value most what they cannot easily access, and avoidants, more than anyone else, are wired to fixate on what slips through their fingers. But here's the danger, and I want you to catch this. If you misuse this principle, if you play games or withdraw as a tactic rather than a genuine alignment with your own self-respect, it backfires. Manipulation only reinforces their fear of intimacy. But when your silence is authentic, when it's rooted in your own boundaries, your own peace, your own standard, that's when it transforms from absence into attraction. That's when it stops being about what you withhold and becomes about who you are. And this is the shift you need to see. Avoidants don't become obsessed because you're perfect or because you're playing hard to get. They become obsessed because you embody something their nervous system doesn't know how to categorize. You are safe, but not suffocating. You are present, but not desperate. You are strong, but not controlling. That combination is so rare that when it's gone, their entire system panics. They don't just want you back. They want to make sense of what just happened. And that need for meaning is what drives their obsession. So the takeaway is this: the moment you align your communication with clarity, calmness, and confidence, and then you have the courage to step back when it's time, you create a paradox that works in your favor. You don't chase. You don't explain. You don't fight for their attention. You simply allow your presence, and then your absence, to do the work that words could never accomplish. And that's the ultimate leverage. Not manipulation, not games, but alignment. When you stop filling every gap, you give their mind no choice but to fill it for you. And in that space, obsession grows. So I'll leave you with this. Sometimes the most powerful communication you'll ever give is the one you don't send. Let your silence speak so loudly that it echoes in their mind long after your words are gone. Because obsession is not born in noise. It's born in the spaces we dare to leave unfilled.